What is the most powerful kind of thinking? We make a distinction between presuppositional thinking and immanent critique, or immanent thinking. Now, I have used these terms interchangeably, or I should say, I have often used presuppositionalism to refer to a form of immanent kind of thinking. But there's a sense in which it's not properly placed. Presuppositional thinking can refer to assumptions that a position makes in order to derive the kind of conclusions that it wants. Whereas immanent thinking can refer to assumptions or necessary facets of the architecture that make up the larger structure. So in an immanent critique, in an immanent analysis, we are thinking about concepts in terms of what they contain, what their architecture necessarily contains. Now, I have thought of presuppositions in the same way, but it's easy to confuse this because we can think of presuppositions as referring to assumptions that give us the kind of structure we want, which is a little bit different from an understanding of an immanent critique. An immanent critique allows us to stand against a position, to analyze a position in such a way that we comprehend the axioms that are necessary to its structure. And this is powerful because we don't get to choose these axioms. They're inherently contained within the structure. This means that there's a limit to what one can do with immanent critique, with what one can do with immanent thinking in terms of producing the kind of structure or system they desire. In other words, an immanent analysis or an immanent critique is not necessarily going to lend itself to a position that is undermined or refuted by that kind of critique. So, if a position tries to adopt immanent thinking because it is the most powerful form of thinking, believing that if it adopts this type of thinking, it will automatically lead to a justification of its structure, this is an error. Because adopting an immanent methodology is not going to guarantee the justification of one's desired belief, because it depends upon what the structure of thought, what the structure of belief actually contains. And this is not within the control of the individual. It is within the capacity of the individual to discover this structure, to unearth it through analysis, but it is not within the individual's control to shape what the structure essentially is. In a presuppositional type of thinking, an individual may be able to distort or arbitrarily place assumptions at the foundation to derive the kind of conclusion that an individual wants. And this would be different from an immanent approach to knowledge. The immanent approach to knowledge allows us to break apart the authority of positions that do not appear contradictory on the surface or can appear complete or authoritative on the surface. But when we probe beyond the surface into the foundation of their architecture, we find that they have assumptions which break apart their system. Immanent thinking, as far as I can tell, is the most powerful form of thinking. It is the thinking that is utilized in the process of dialectic. It is a form of thinking that doesn't merely think about the surface, about the appearance, but what is necessary in order for that appearance, for that structure to exist. It probes the foundational assumptions that make up a position and tries to comprehend the ontological and the epistemological and the authority nature of these axioms or these attributes, and allows these attributes to unfold against the architecture itself. What this means in more practical terms, for example, is that all conservatism shatters and breaks apart by immanent critique, because conservatism is based upon presenting appearance as totality. Conservatism is frightened of the immanent analysis of its position, because more often than not, the architecture, the structure that underlies, that lies beneath that architecture, destroys the claim of the position itself. It ends up negating it. It ends up demonstrating that it's a contradiction of it, that the thing that is claimed to be so crucial and vital is actually not the mechanism of power, the mechanism of authority, the mechanism of change, the mechanism that enables the actual function. That breaks apart when we examine the immanent structure of a position. So if we want to learn to think powerfully, we should always be thinking in terms of immanent critique, critique from within, critique from the foundation of the structure. Now, as I have said, I have used presuppositions to refer to immanent critique. I do think that we can use presuppositional thinking to refer to a form of immanent critique, but it's probably better just to say immanent critique, because that's a more precise articulation of what we mean. Whereas presupposition can have the confusion of referring to arbitrary assumptions that we make to enable the type of structure that we want. The power of wielding an immanent critique is that one is usually a step ahead of the position that they are critiquing or the opposition that they are engaged with, because they are not thinking about the mere surface. They are thinking about what underlies that surface, or they are thinking about what must be the case, better yet, what is the case in order to make the structure exist. And that, of course, is incredibly powerful, because it tells us where the real authority lies within the domain of a position.